The night didn't explode. It thinned, like glass stretched too far over heat, waiting for the softest tap to shatter. My name is Ava Morgan. I'm 31, a project coordinator who pays attention for a living, and on Sundays I bring food to the people who taught me to call it love. I showed up at my mother Elaine's house with a lasagna still breathing steam, a loaf slick with garlic butter, and a quiet hope that if I offered something from my hands, they might offer something from their hearts. Mom did that small, distracted smile she saves for neighbors. Then my brother Liam slid a cardboard box of wings and limp fries onto the center of the table like a flag planting itself on new land. Real food, Mom said, and laughter skittered around the room. Dad, Richard, slapped his knee like a studio audience. I smiled the way you smile when the splinter hasn't started throbbing yet. They talked flights and hotel blocks and who was in the reunion group chat. I had never seen a single message. I waited for the kind of pause other people step into. When it came, I kept my voice even. Just tell me when the reunion is. I'll book early this time. Liam didn't even look up. You're not family. Don't come. It wasn't a blow. It was a practiced line delivered in a voice that knew it would be protected. The room rewarded him for the performance. Dad laughed again. Mom's mouth tried not to smile and failed. I looked around the table, searching for one face to say, too far. No one auditioned. I didn't throw the wine. I didn't flip the table. I stood, eased my coat from the chair, and slid the lasagna back into my arms. The casserole dish still too hot for a person with sense. Thanks for dinner, I said to no one in particular, which was everyone in particular. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and old photos. On the way out, I noticed the fridge covered in other people's children. Outside, the evening was gentle, a soft Carolina blue. My car's interior had the kind of quiet you can hear. Some moments don't break, they rearrange. The world moved 2 inches, and there it was, the outline of a door I didn't know I could close. I drove home slow, both hands on the wheel, the lasagna cooling beside me like a small animal I had rescued from a place it didn't belong. Before I tell you what happened next, the knock, the text, the 4 words that changed everything, tell me where you're watching from. Drop a comment and let me know, then keep your seat. The next part starts when the silence tried to collect a debt, and I finally learned how to answer it. The house stayed quiet for 4 days, the kind of quiet that pretends to be peace while it waits for the bill to come due. I went to work, answered emails, watered the plants I'd been neglecting, and set the lasagna container on the counter like a statement. No one called, no one texted. The family group chat I wasn't in, I imagined, kept humming somewhere I couldn't see. On the morning of the 5th day, my phone lit up with a number I knew by heart. Liam. I let it ring once, twice. I didn't have to answer. He sent a text instead. Hey, weird question. Did your bank block the transfer? Loan payment didn't go through. Can you push it today? I read it twice. He didn't use my name. He didn't mention dinner. Just the payment. Like the only conversation worth having. I set the phone down, poured a glass of water, and watched the condensation run a clean line down the side. Then I picked the phone up again and typed 4 words that felt like a spine hardening. Not family, not funding. I hit send. The message turned blue and sat there between us like a door clicking shut. I blocked his number. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was decisive. It didn't stay that way. Before dawn the next morning, the pounding started. Not polite knocks, but a full-body rhythm that made the hall picture frames clink against the wall. 3 beats heavy and stubborn, a pattern I knew from childhood when my father wanted the house awake. Richard's rhythm. In it, a shorter, angrier echo. Liam. I stood in the hallway with a mug of tea cupped in both hands and breathed the steam. The door shook once, twice. Ava! Liam called through it, voice muffled but hot. Open up, this is ridiculous. Another slam. We need to talk. I didn't answer. The tea warmed my palms. I focused on the tile grout line at my feet, the simple fact of it, how it didn't move even when the door did. My heart climbed toward my throat, then changed its mind and settled back down. Through the peephole, I saw my father's shoulder, still broad, even in the years that had taken other things, and the edge of Liam's baseball cap. No flowers, no apology, just urgency in borrowed authority. "Ava," my father said, voice lined with command. "You're being dramatic. Open the door." I took another breath. Boundaries feel cruel to those who profited from your lack of them. The thought arrived fully formed, not like a slogan, but like a fact I had always known and never had words for. I set the mug on the console table, turned the deadbolt one more notch by habit, and let the pounding pass through the door, through the frame, through the building. Weather, I told myself, let it move on. After 10 minutes, the rhythm lost confidence. Footsteps retreated. Through the peephole, a flash of our old silver SUV idled, then drifted away. The stairwell refound its echo. In the kitchen, the refrigerator motor kicked on, a small domestic sound that felt like applause. The calls began after that. Unknown numbers, mom's ringtone, dad's name in block letters. I let them all go to voicemail. I washed the mug, wiped the counter, pulled a small overnight bag from the closet, and filled it with clothes I wouldn't have to think about. Toothbrush. A book I'd been reading in pieces for too long. The folder where I kept my passport and social security card, because instinct told me to be careful now. Outside, the morning had the thin, pearly light that makes everything look undecided. I locked the door, tugged once to be sure, and carried the bag downstairs. My car started on the first try. For a moment, I sat with my hands at 10 and 2 and listened to the engine, to the neighborhood waking up, to my phone vibrating itself toward the edge of the passenger seat. I let it. There's a place 2 hours away my grandmother calls the retreat from the circus, a white cottage with a porch that faces a stand of pines and a kitchen that always smells like something warm. I pulled onto the highway and headed there, mile markers ticking by like small, measured yeses. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't plan what to say when I arrived. I just drove, steady and simple, toward the one person who had never asked me to pay for my seat at the table. Ruth's cottage sits back from the road, white paint softening under pine shade, a porch swing that remembers everyone who's ever needed it. When I pulled in, she was already at the door with a dish towel over one shoulder like a flag that meant, "Come in, you're safe." She didn't ask questions. She just touched my cheek with the back of her fingers and said, "Took you long enough," the way some people say, "I'm glad you're here." Inside, the kitchen smelled like onions surrendering to butter. She ladled soup without ceremony, set a slice of cornbread on the rim, and slid the bowl in front of me. We didn't speak until the spoon found the bottom. When I finally told her about the dinner, the laughter, the door I didn't open, she listened the way only the very old or the very kind can. No interruptions, no solutions, just space for the words to land. When I ran out of facts, she pushed the salt toward me and said, "First time you tell people who've lived off your yes that your answer is no, they call it betrayal." She lifted her chin, eyes clear. "It isn't, it's correction." I nodded, felt something unknot. She refilled the bowl. "People drink from your generosity so long they forget it isn't a spring," she went on, almost like she was talking to herself. "Let the well run dry, and they won't thank you for the water you gave. They'll break the bucket." We sat with that image between us. The swing creaked on the porch. A blue jay complained in the pines. Ruth reached across and squeezed my wrist. "Eat, then sleep. You can decide what to do after you rest." I slept on her couch under a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and summer closets. In the morning, we had coffee on the steps, our knees catching sunlight. I told her I'd go home, that I needed my own bed, my own desk, my own quiet. She didn't argue. "Take what you need," she said, and tucked a paper bag of muffins into my arm like a blessing. Back at my building, the hallway felt ordinary again. On my doormat lay a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, a neat stack of 20s, $400, the kind of money that looks like help until you notice it has no name, no note, no apology, just cash, like a tip for services they wished I'd keep providing. I stood at the sink and let the envelope sit on the counter while the afternoon thinned. There's a way to say no without saying anything. When the sun touched the window frame, I slid the money back into the paper, lifted the trash lid, and let it drop. Not with drama, with ceremony. The sound it made against the coffee grounds was small and final. The phone started up again, unknown numbers, then Mom. Her first voicemail sounded bright, her voice pitched too high like she'd reheated cheerfulness and served it lukewarm. "Honey, it got out of hand. Why don't you come for Sunday lunch? I'll make the roast you love." I stopped it halfway. The second message came after midnight, her tone catching in just the right places. "Family gets through things," she said, using the word family like a key she was sure still fit the lock. By morning, Dad had entered the chorus, dry as ever. "Don't be dramatic. We're not enemies." I didn't answer. I rinsed my mug, stacked the mail, and tried to pay the power bill online. That's when I saw it. A paper statement I didn't remember requesting. My name printed neatly at the top, and beneath the payment line, a signature that looked like mine had been put through a press. Too clean, too curved, the A in Ava looping in a way my hand never learns. I held it up to the lamp. The curl caught light and memory in the wrong places. Once is a mistake, I told myself, but the part of me that counts details stood very still. I set the strange utility bill on my desk and opened my laptop. If I've learned anything in project work, it's that the numbers will tell you who you've been. I logged into my bank, then the card accounts, then the old email folders where receipts go to nap. I pulled up 2 years of statements and started reading line by line. There it was, the midnight transfers that had felt temporary, the Venmo notes with jokes that only made sense if you ignored the balance, the delivery orders that ended up on my card even when I wasn't there. The washer I helped buy that broke in a month, the cash apps, the "can you spot me" habits that had become a schedule. I made a spreadsheet, nothing fancy. Date, amount, who, why. I didn't sigh. I just filled the cells until they meant something. By noon, the total made my eyes water in a way that had nothing to do with emotion. $20,000. Not one boulder, but a slide of pebbles that had buried the same corner of me over and over. I printed the sheets and pressed a neon yellow highlighter over every line that was not about my life. The ink glowed on the page like daylight, as if being honest could turn a statement into a window. Evan came by after his shift, hair still damp from a quick shower, a takeout bag in hand. He took one look at the papers spread across the dining table and set the bag down without comment. "Do you want coffee?" he asked. It wasn't a question about caffeine. "Yes," I said, and kept highlighting. He moved around the kitchen like he'd learned my apartment's language. He didn't ask for the story. He poured, handed me a mug, and sat at the opposite chair, close enough to be company, far enough to leave me room. When the printer finally made that tired gasp that means it has done enough for the day, I stacked the pages and slid them into a manila envelope. In block letters across the front, I wrote a title that made me smile without humor: Paper Cuts. The phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it go. Something in me said answer. "Ms. Morgan?" a man's voice asked, clipped and careful. "Thomas Reed from Greenlight Legal. We're calling to confirm your co-signature on a $10,000 business loan for Liam Morgan." I stared at the highlighted stacks. "I didn't co-sign anything," I said. A short pause. Paper shuffling on his end. "Understood. We've reviewed an application bearing your signature. There are inconsistencies that concern us. I wanted to verify before we proceed. My mouth went dry, but my voice didn't. Send me a copy of whatever you have. Of course, he said, by secure email. And Ms. Morgan, he cleared his throat. We're not moving forward on this without clarity. You will not be held liable for something you did not authorize. I hung up, pressed my palms flat on the table, and felt the grain of the wood. Evan watched me over the rim of his cup. Do you want me to stay? He asked. Yes, I said, and meant it. The email arrived within the hour. Attached were scans crisp enough to want to be believed. I clicked the first page, my name in block type. Beneath it, a flourish of a signature that pretended to be mine. The A too proud, the V too smooth, the tail of the last letter curling like a practiced bow. It matched the odd signature on the paper bill I had held to the lamp. Too perfect, not my hand, my outline. I clicked the second page and felt the cold climb from the floor. Under the signature, a contact address. Not mine. My parents' home. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. I printed the packet and set it beside the envelope of yellow stripes. The room sounded different, as if the apartment had grown a harder edge. I labeled a fresh folder and slid the loan copies in behind the statements. Then I sat very still and looked at the door like I might see the shape of the next step through it. In the morning, I called a lawyer I'd met through work, a woman with a calm voice and a grammar of facts. Her name was Ms. Carson. I sent a short email first, subject line urgent, attachments labeled clearly. Then she called me back within the hour. Ms. Morgan, she said, I've read the documents. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's identity fraud. We'll move quietly. People like this thrive on chaos. I told her about the dinner, the pounding on the door, the cash envelope, the forged signature, the address at my parents' house. She didn't flinch. Here's what you're going to do today, she said, and laid out the steps like stones across a creek. Freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. Change every password, banking, utilities, email, mobile carrier. Set 2-factor authentication. Document everything, save voicemails, texts, emails, screenshots. Forward copies to a neutral account you control. Then mail yourself the packet, certified, and don't open it when it arrives. That's a dated seal. I wrote it all down, then did it the way she said. Credit freezes, passwords changed, authentication codes printed and locked in the firebox. I moved every voicemail and text into a folder named Evidence and duplicated it to a spare drive. I composed an email to myself, subject if anything happens, and attached scans of the forged loan, the odd utility bill, and the spreadsheet of yellow lines. When the printer spat out the mailing label, I slid everything into a thick envelope, sealed it, and walked it to the post office. The clerk asked if I wanted tracking. No, I said. If it never comes back, that means it did its job. She gave me the kind of smile clerks give women who sound like they've already been to court. Back home, I found a stiff cream envelope in my mailbox. Heavy paper, gold edge, pale blue crest, Lakeside Resort. Inside, a printed itinerary for a family reunion, activities, dinners, a required family meeting, and a note in my father's tight hand. Liam wants to propose a repayment plan in person. This is our chance to rebuild. The word rebuild made my skin go cold. Beneath it, my first name in a script that tried to sound warm. An email from Mom arrived minutes later. Subject line, moving forward. Honey, let's keep this in the family, she wrote. No need to involve outsiders. Come on Sunday, we can talk. I'll make your favorite. The sentence said lunch. The subtext said hush. I forwarded both to Ms. Carson. She replied within the half hour. We'll respond, she wrote. For now, do not engage. Then a second email. I'll draft a cease and desist to Liam regarding any use of your name, likeness, or signature, and any contact intended to solicit funds. We'll send it certified to his business address. The apartment felt precisely measured. I took a slow lap around it like you do after moving furniture. On the counter sat the paper bag of muffins Ruth had tucked into my arm. I ate one over the sink, not because I was hungry, but because it reminded me of the person who never asked for anything. The phone buzzed again, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail and didn't listen. By late afternoon, Miss Carson called back to read the letter aloud. It was clinical and sharp, a page of polite, hard lines. Cease any and all communications not through counsel. Cease use of my identifying information. Preserve records. Acknowledge receipt. We'll send it now, she said. I've arranged for service at his shop before close. I stood by the window with the phone to my ear and watched the light thin to evening. Okay, I said. The word felt like a door swinging from the right set of hinges. At 6:42, an email arrived from Ms. Carson with a scanned proof of service and a timestamp. Under it, a single sentence. It's in his hands. I put my palm against the cool glass and stayed there a long time. The building hummed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. On my table, the manila envelope marked paper cuts sat beside the new folder I'd labeled with today's date. Quiet gathered in the corners, not empty, not soft. It had edges now. It had teeth. The cease and desist landed at 6:42 p.m. I know because Ms. Carson sent the timestamp like a receipt for a boundary. 20 minutes later, an email from Liam slid into my inbox with no subject line, just a single sentence. You think you're better than us now? You'll regret this. No apology, no denial, just spite-wearing family pride. Evan came by after dark with an overnight bag of his own. He read the line over my shoulder and set his hand flat between my shoulder blades, steady as a backstop. Stay with me a few days, he said. Let them pound on a door that isn't yours. I nodded. I didn't want to run, but I also didn't want to be easy to find. Before I packed, I drove out to Ruth's. The pines held the last of the light like a choir swallowing an amen. She was at the window with her knitting, needles pausing when she saw me. They served him? She asked. They did, I said, and took the chair by the lamp. Ruth set the yarn aside and looked at me for a long breath. Your father told me once, she said, as if she were reporting the weather from years ago, that if he ever lost your trust, he'd lose his son too. She lifted one shoulder. Then he said, I'll take her name instead. I didn't think he meant it literally. The room tilted, not a lot, just enough to set the picture frames right. So he knew, I said. They all did, she answered. Liam doesn't tie his shoes without Richard's blessing. It should have made me angry. Instead, something in me went still. You can't shame a person for what they can name. I sent the letter, I told her, and I'm going to Evans for a bit. Ruth's smile reached all the way. Good, she said. Keep your peace where it can't be borrowed. Back at my place, I packed like I was leaving a hotel. Small bag, only what I'd actually use. Toothbrush, 2 shirts, the folder marked paper cuts. On my way out, the phone rang with Mom's name. I almost let it go. Curiosity or mercy made me swipe. Ava, she said, and the sound was different, raw, not staged. I miss you. She was quiet a beat. I'm sorry. For the dinner. For the things we said. For not stopping it when I should have. The words didn't come dressed. They walked in barefoot. I sat on the arm of the couch and looked at the door I was about to lock. I forgive you, I said, and felt the truth of it loosen something at the base of my neck. Will you come to the reunion? She asked, small again. Please. I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. No, Mom, I can't. I'm not punishing anybody. I'm just done walking into rooms where my respect is optional. She cried softly, thanked me for answering, and hung up. I stood there a minute longer, the quiet, broad, and breathable, then turned the deadbolt and carried my bag to the car. I stayed at Evans 3 nights. The city sounded different from his place. Freight trains, a neighbor who practiced piano at decent hours. We cooked simple food, talked very little, and slept through the hours when my phone used to make a case against me. On the fourth afternoon, I swung by my apartment for mail. Wedged among flyers was a cream envelope, not as heavy as the reunion invitation, but proud of itself anyway. Inside, a single Polaroid, a long table at Lakeside Resort, my family lined up in their best good behavior. Richard at the head, Liam thinner, Mom's smile stitched tight. At the center of the frame, my old chair, empty, lit like a display. On the back, in blue ink, a line in my mother's hand. Missing our girl tonight. Love, Mom. I looked at the picture until the edges warmed under my thumbs. No ache came, no second guess. The empty chair didn't accuse me, it confirmed me. You can leave a table and still keep your hunger. I slid the photo into the front pocket of the paper cuts folder and locked the door behind me. Evan was waiting in the car. "You good?" he asked. "Better," I said, and meant it. Part 7. The Soft Revenge. I wrote the letter at Evan's kitchen table, careful and plain, the way you'd write directions for a stranger who needs to get home. I listed the dates and amounts, every bailout, every spot me, every transfer that had felt temporary until it wasn't. $20,000, down to the penny. At the bottom I printed, "Consider the debt forgiven. What remains between us isn't money, it's memory. Spend that carefully." I signed my name in blue ink, the imperfect A that only my hand makes, and slid the pages into a thick envelope. At the post office, I didn't ask for tracking. I fed the letter into the slot and listened for the small, mechanical swallow. That was the revenge. No fireworks, no scenes, just closing a ledger they'd kept open in my name. After that, the invitations kept coming in smaller ways. A cousin I hadn't heard from since high school sent a cheery text about how family always finds a way. An uncle forwarded a prayer chain. Mom left a message about a Sunday roast, just us, as if the resort dining room hadn't already seated my chair without me. I answered none of it. Every time I felt the old reflex to explain, I put my phone face down and let the feeling pass. I made dinner, I walked around the block, I let the quiet grow muscle. On Wednesday, my phone lit with a number I didn't recognize. I picked up without thinking. "Ava?" a woman said, voice soft, frayed at the edges. "It's Kara. Liam's ex. We'd met a few times." Smiled like people doing a favor for their partners. "I'm sorry to call," she said quickly, "but I thought you should know what's being said." I didn't answer, so she kept going. "Liam's telling anyone who'll listen that you're trying to destroy him, that you cut him off to punish the family. Your dad's repeating it. People believe them because they want to." I watched a freight train slide past the apartment window, boxcars painted with cities I'll never see. "Okay," I said. Kara took a breath. "But they're wrong. I saw it up close. The spending, the favors, the way your mom smoothed it all out so no one had to say no. You were the only adult in that house." The line went quiet except for her breathing and the faraway bell of the crossing. "I moved out," she added, almost to herself. "I couldn't live like that anymore." "Thank you," I said. The words were simple and exactly right. After we hung up, I stood for a while in the kitchen, palms flat on the cool counter, and let the shape of what she'd said find its place. The story they'd written for me didn't fit anymore, and without me to carry it, it slid off their shoulders and hit the floor like something cheap. By Friday, the rumor mill had eaten its own tail. A mutual friend called to say Liam's business had missed a supplier payment, then a second, and the bank had flagged his account. Dad was furious, loud in public where he usually stayed dry. "She ruined him," someone claimed he said at the hardware store. I pictured the scene, voices pitched just high enough to draw a circle, and felt nothing that resembled guilt. You can't ruin a house of cards by setting down the table it sits on. I spent that evening at Evan's, a pot of chili on low, the game muted on the TV. We didn't talk about my family. We talked about paint colors for his spare room and which trail had the better view at the overlook. When the chili was ready, we ate standing at the counter, the way people do when they're too tired for ceremony. Later, on the balcony, the city breathing in and out around us, Evan leaned his shoulder into mine. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know," I answered. And I did. Peace didn't arrive as fanfare. It came in small, ordinary proofs. A bill with only my charges, a night of sleep no one tried to interrupt, a story about me I no longer had to correct. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, made coffee, and pulled the paper cuts folder from my bag. I slid the Polaroid from its pocket and set it on the table, my family in hotel light, my chair empty as a fact. It didn't taunt, it testified. I tucked it back, closed the folder, and opened the window to let in the kind of air that makes you want to clean. I didn't know yet what I'd do with the space I'd cleared. I only knew it was mine now, earned without spectacle, guarded without speeches. The soft revenge had done its work. I stopped burning so they could stay warm, and the cold that followed belonged to them. The day after I cleaned, the mail brought one last echo. Cream envelope, smaller than the resort invitation, heavy enough to think well of itself. Inside was a single Polaroid from the reunion, hotel light, linen napkins, Richard at the head like always, Liam thinner, Elaine's smile tugged tight by invisible thread. In the middle, framed neat as a centerpiece, my chair, empty and lit. On the back, in my mother's hand, blue ink that had seen better days. Missing our girl tonight. Love, Mom. I stood at the counter and let the picture warm under my thumbs. It didn't ask me to reconsider. It didn't bargain. It told the truth. They had staged fullness, and there I wasn't. I slid the Polaroid into the paper cuts folder, locked the cabinet, and picked up my keys. Ruth's porch was catching late sun when I pulled in. She had the shawl over her shoulders and the look she saves for weather and grandchildren. "You look lighter," she said, before I'd even made the steps. "They sent a photo," I told her, taking my usual chair. Table set, my seat front and center, empty. She nodded like a woman who knew the ending before the book came out. "Emptiness can be proof," she said. "Not of what you lack, of what you refused." We sat a while and listened to the sound of the pines working. She asked nothing I wasn't ready to answer. When I stood to go, she pressed a clipping of rosemary into my hand. "For remembrance," she said, then tipped her head. "And for roast chicken that feeds people who feed you back." Driving home at dusk, the road ran easy. I stopped for groceries, lemons, a whole chicken, a bunch of greens, the cocoa Evan likes. Back in my kitchen, I set an extra chair at my small table and turned it, just slightly, to face the window. I wiped the surface like I was preparing a place for someone who knew how to sit with care. I framed a photo of Ruth and me from last spring and set it beside the salt. Then I tucked the rosemary into a glass by the sink, and the kitchen remembered its purpose. Mom called as the chicken went in. I let it ring until the oven clicked into its steady breath and then answered. Her voice was quiet, nothing arranged. "Thank you," she said, without preface. "For what?" "For forgiving me the other night. I've been thinking about all the ways we took from you." She paused. "I can't fix it backward. I know that." I leaned against the counter and watched the lemon halves shine. "I don't need backward," I said. "I just need honest and space." "I can give you that," she said. No negotiation followed. It sounded for once like a promise she'd make to herself, too. We talked about small things, her garden, the neighbor's new dog, Ruth's stubborn roses. When she asked again if I'd come by Sunday, I kept my voice even. "Not now," I said, "but I'll pick up the phone when you call." "That's enough," she said, and for the first time it felt like she meant it. Evan arrived with his quiet and a bottle he'd bought because the label made him laugh. We ate at the table with the extra chair turned to the window. We didn't toast. We didn't name anything. We passed dishes back and forth like people who had learned how to keep what they were given. Later, cocoa steaming on the table, he studied my face. "You seem different," he said. "I finally understood something," I told him. "Peace isn't the absence of family, it's the presence of boundaries." He nodded, then tapped the frame of Ruth and me. "And love? Love stays," I said, "where respect stays in the room." Outside, the city moved through its chores. Inside, the air was warm and ordinary. I looked at the extra chair and thought of the people who would sit there. Ruth, when the pines released her for an afternoon. Evan, already here. Friends who knew how to bring kindness and not a bill. I rinsed the mugs, turned off the lights, and stood a moment in the doorway. The table waited, set for a life I could afford, paid for in attention, served with a simple rule: who comes hungry leaves fed, and no one eats my name.